Hi, this is Priya, and today I'm going to show you how to make an 8-step value scale. So we have our lighter values or tones over on the left side, and then our darker values over on the right side. Looking at this one, we have hatching or cross-hatching up on top, then we have stippling, and then on this last one I blended the graphite drawing pencils together. I'm going to start out by drawing some boxes for the value scales. I'm going to measure 8 inches across, and then to keep things simple, I'm just going to use the width of my ruler for how tall the scales are going to be. And if you look at your ruler, you might notice that the end of the 1 inch might not be the end of the ruler. So take a look at that and make sure that you're lining things up correctly. So I'm going to start out actually by doing a up and down line to mark the edge of my paper. And I'm going to use my HB pencil, but I feel like at this point it doesn't really matter that much which one you're using. So this will be one end of my value scales. And looking at this, I didn't get it straight up and down, but I'm not too concerned about that because I'm really just using this as an exercise in lights and darks. But if I was going to be a little more precise, I might want to go back. It can kind of trick your eye and can be confusing later on if you're not level with the page. So let's do that just a little bit better, but don't be concerned about having it perfect. So then I'm going to line up the end of my ruler or the end of my inch. In this case, it's the end of my inch. And I'm going to measure across 8 inches. And I'm going to do the bottom of my ruler. You don't want to measure out your bottom side. And then I'm just going to do some little tick marks at the 1 inch points all the way across. Okay, then looking down here, I'm going to put a 1/2 inch in between, I'd say. You can do smaller, that might feel a little tight. You can do more if you have a bigger piece of paper. But I'm going to go for a 1/2 inch mark here. And then I'm going to bring my ruler down to that spot, this direction, line up the end of my ruler or the end of my inch here, and draw another line. Doing the same thing as I go down, I want to make a total of 3 boxes. And if I want to be precise, I could also measure out there as well. Okay, so on this bottom one, I'm gonna mark little dots on my 1 inch point. And then I'm going to go up and down across the paper to connect these. Okay, so there I've got a pretty good grid made up. I'm going to come back with a plastic eraser and erase the extra lines. And then I maybe also want to clean up this inside area where I had that extra line, because we don't really want to see that on the edges. Okay, so I have my 3 boxes, and I'm going to make a value scale of light to dark. And when we're talking about value in art, remember we're talking about the range of light and dark, which I feel like it can sometimes get confusing with the word importance, but that's not really what we're talking about when we're talking about a range of values. And if you're looking at your drawing pencils, you're going to find that they also come in a range. You don't need every pencil in the box to get a good range of lights and darks. So I'm going to do my 2H pencil, and the H stands for hard on this end. I'm going to have my HB hitting in the middle, and then I'm going to use my 4B and my 6B over here to get some real good darks. So let's measure, or just mark on here, HB, or sorry, this one is 2H. And then we'll do 2H again. We will do 2H and HB here. Then we're going to do only the HB in this one. We'll do HB and 4B. We'll do all 4B. And then we'll be 4B, 6B, and then all 6B on the end. So starting on the top here with the hatching, I'm going to start by making little marks side to side. Most of the time when I'm drawing, I don't need to make really big marks that cover this whole square at once. I'm going to be using more smaller marks to define a form. So starting at the top, I'm going to press really lightly, even pressure, because this is going to be my lightest square in my range of lights to dark. And actually, as I'm going along, I'm doing the same thing in my this first square and the second one. So I could be bringing these lines all the way across here at once if I wanted to. It's kind of just a personal preference thing. And it's also good to start out and make sure that your pencil is good and sharp. So I'm going to keep going, getting closer to the bottom. I feel like I'm hunched at kind of an awkward angle around here, just so you all can see the camera, which is why I'm kind of holding my pencil funny sometimes, but you want to be using the tip of it, not the side at this point. Okay, so we're going to have our lightest value here for hatching, and then I'm going to come back in the other direction for some cross hatching. Okay, so reaching the bottom of this one here, you can see I've got a slightly lighter value here. It's getting a little darker. I could maybe increase the density of some of these lines if I wanted to push it a little bit farther without adding another pencil in. But here I've got my 2H, 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 and HB. So at this point, I might make a decision about which pencils I want to start out with. I think, again, I'm going to start out with my 2H, and then do some hatching with the HB, And then maybe I'll come back again in the third direction and add a little more darkness to it. We'll take a look at what it looks like after our first two steps before we go on. So you can always be adjusting and readjusting as you go in a drawing, adding more darks and lights and pushing things farther. Sometimes it's a little harder to back off once you've realized you've gone too far. So that's partly why you want to try to work up everything gradually rather than just focusing on one single area and then moving on to the next area. I feel like this could be like a great texture that I'm drawing for some rain or maybe some straw. All right, so there's one direction. I'm going to come back in the other direction. See, so it's going this way. I'm going to come back this other way. And, so this is the exact same as I was doing with the 2H pencil. And so obviously it looks about the same now. I'm going to come back the next time with the HB pencil, and hopefully that's going to be enough to push it up into the next range of lights and darks. Because when we look at these, we want to be able to see kind of a distinct change between each of the squares. And we should be able to achieve that, at least in the early stages, without changing the amount of pressure that we're applying too drastically. So maybe if I'm here, I want to be intentionally a little lighter, or on the far end, I might want to intentionally dig my pencil in a little more. But I feel like we've got a good range of pencils here that we shouldn't really need to do that too much. So I'm going to come in a third direction here with my HB pencil and see how that works. And again, I'm just doing small hatch marks. I don't need to try to go all the way across at once because when we're drawing, we pretty rarely make that big of a stroke if we're drawing with graphite. Okay, so I'm seeing that there's a pretty distinct shift here. If I wanted to make it more distinct, I maybe would have switched to the HB a little sooner. But I feel like that is distinct enough that we can tell that there's a change going on, and it's like the next step darker. I'm gonna pause and sharpen this one to make sure I have it nice and sharp for the rest of the HB squares. And all these little hatch marks are good for developing hand-eye coordination for sure. And there's those little muscles in your hands that you maybe don't have a whole lot of use for until you start drawing and holding a pencil a lot. So you might want to compare here the kind of like light and dark we're getting between like just the HB and just the 2H, and the kind of different texture that we're getting as well. So I'm going to come back to the HB in the opposite direction for the cross hatching, and then we'll take a look at it, and I'll probably want to do the horizontal lines as well. So HB is looking like it doesn't still have quite as dark of a value as my combination of the 2H and HB, so I'm going to come back and do the horizontal lines over this one. And also I could decide at this point if I want to do them over the 4H. But I think that with the 4H one, or 4B, I'm going to want to use the darker pencil when I get to that to help with that value shift. So I'm just going to focus on this HB square first. All right, so I can see now there's a little more distinctive shift between these. If I want to make it more intense, I could come back and draw some lines this way, but for now, let's switch over to my 4B pencil, or 4B pencil. So I've gone left, I've gone right, I'm gonna go horizontal again this time. And you'll notice that as you move towards the higher numbers of the beads, your lead is also going to feel a little softer. Okay, 4B, continuing with the same strategy. Going one direction, then we'll go the other direction. And I think that I'm gonna do my base coat here with the 4B as well, so I'm gonna keep going across this side. And I'm going to come back and cross hatch in the other direction, but this time I'm only going to do it in the 4B square because we've got a lot more range of darkness that we can get to. So I think I'm going to do 6B on top of this one, and then we'll take a look and see how it looks. Okay, and I'm looking at these. I feel like this one and this one, they're not quite as distinctive yet as I'd like them to be, so I'm going to keep going with the horizontal hatching, and I might end up doing some vertical hatching here as well, but we'll take a look and see when I reach that point. So I feel like without those vertical hatches, this one has reached a pretty distinctive difference between here. So I might want to go back after evaluating and do some vertical hatch lines here to help with this transition so it's not quite so extreme. But I'm going to go here from my 4B to my 4B and my 6B. So switching pencils again, got my 6B ready to go. sometimes the edges can get a little tricky, but don't get lazy and forget to fill them in totally. All right, so looking at this one, I feel like I do have somewhat of a value shift here between these. You can sometimes squint your eyes and that helps see those steps. Because I know I want the 6B to be really dark, I'm maybe gonna shift this up a little bit more to help with that transition in between the 4B and 6B. So I'm gonna go some ups and downs here, and then I'll maybe readjust back here as well. Making sure I'm not getting lazy around the edges. Okay, and with that we can tell that this is really a definite step darker than these other ones. So 6B, I'm going to use this the whole way. I'm going to go this direction, that direction, side, and top to bottom for the darkest I can possibly get with these ranges of pencils that I'm using. And as you can see, it is definitely a softer lead. So if we were just to compare like the width of the line that I'm making here on the 2H end and the 6B end, that's a pretty significant difference there. So the H pencils are good for really delicate work. Well, these ones are definitely more for blending and smudging together and just getting a nice range of darks. But because I feel like my lead is getting smaller and smaller, every line I draw, I'm maybe gonna need to stop and sharpen this one again. You see cross-hatching used a lot in printmaking and etching type techniques because when you're using the printing ink and going in those grooves, you can't really just blend it the way you can blend graphite or charcoal. So if you're looking at prints, you're probably going to see a lot of cross-hatching as a way of showing darks and lights and modeling to create an illusion of space. All right, so there's my darkest dark here. I've got my lightest light there. I feel like this going along here is a pretty even step of darks to lights. I could maybe fuss with it and refine it just a little, but for the most part, I'm happy with it. And I'm gonna use this top one as a guide for what I'm going for on these ones down below it. So for the stippling, again, I'm gonna start out with my 2H pencil. And when I'm stippling, I want to think of it as drawing like little dotting the I's or crossing the T's. If I have a marker or a marker pen type tool, going up and down like this works just fine. If I'm using a pencil, it just doesn't really work. So I want to think of it as more like dotting the eyes. And so I'm doing more of a random pattern than what I see with the cross hatching. And so I've crossed my eye, dotted my eyes over here. I'm going to come along and dot my eyes over here. And I can think about the density being built up as I do this. And then I'm going to maybe come back and start drawing some lines kind of in the other direction. So this also helps making it feel a little more like a random pattern than maybe like the way these feel a little more directional. So looking at these, I could probably add a little more in here. I'm not really seeing a whole lot of shift yet happening between them, so I'm just going to keep going with dotting those I's and crossing those T's until I feel like there's a little more distinction between the two. All right, so now this one's starting to feel like it's got a little darker value to it. Space feels like it's filled in, it's a little more denser. And I'm gonna keep doing that as I go through from light to dark. This one here, I'd be using the 2H and the HB pencils. So I guess I could keep going with this one here. I'd probably wanna lean a little heavier on the HB until I reach the far end. And I'm not gonna demonstrate all of that because it'd make for kind of a long video. But so you can see here, there is that difference that's starting to develop as the space gets denser. Okay, and then the next row we have is just for blending. And we're not gonna be blending with our fingers. We wanna blend by the way that we're layering the graphite. One layer on top of the next layer. And let's see. Okay, I'm gonna take a break from this one pretty soon. It's starting to get there. I feel like I can fill this space in a little more. The stippling, after a while, I feel like it does cause my hand to cramp up, so take some breaks if you need to. I feel like this is probably the slowest one. But if we were to compare the texture, I feel like this would be like burlap and this would be peach fuzz or something. So maybe think about what it kind of reminds you of and how you might use these in a drawing besides just being a technical exercise. Okay, so, and for all the blending, rather than using the end of the pencil, I'm going to be holding it on the side and using this side a little more. And I'm going to start out just by like rubbing little circles together. And because this is the lightest one, I'm hardly putting any pressure with my pencil. And I could also start moving in different directions a little more. But what I'm really doing is I'm just drawing little circles over and over and over again. And as I move through the darker values, I'm probably going to start with the lighter color or the lighter toned pencil and then build up the darks on top of that. Because you can always go darker, but you can't really go lighter again. Okay, so if this is my lightest light, doesn't exactly line up with these because we are going to have a little more empty and negative space in these, but that's okay because I know this is going to be my lightest light. My next one, I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm maybe going to put another layer of graphite on top of it. And actually, I guess I could just go all three of these at once to save myself some time or just stopping to think about it. Okay, so I've got, this is my lightest. I'm going to come back with another coat of the same pencil, maybe applying a little more pressure this time, but again, I want to have a real smooth blend, so I'm just layering on a little bit at a time. So I'm going to try to get to the next step in my value scale here. So we can see there's a little shift here. I want to push this just a little bit more though. So I'm going to keep coming in here, keep layering a little more graphite on the surface. And I should be able to get it a little darker without going too far, because this is the lightest pencil that I have with me today. And it's only going to get so dark. Okay, so there we are. Still pretty smooth. There are blending tools that I could use if I wanted to help make this smoother, but I'd say for just this exercise that we're doing, let's just layer the graphite on the graphite and practice doing the blending without using extra tools today. Okay, so I've got the 2H layered twice or 3 times, and then I'm going to put my HB on top of this one. Okay, so I'm just going to keep going. This one will be all HB. Then I'd start with the HB and layer on some 4B, all 4B, 4B, 6B, and solid 6B as I keep going here. So I'm not going to record myself doing all that because I feel like it's kind of gets to be a long video. But plan on spending, I'd say like 40 to 60 minutes on this exercise. And if you've done this kind of an exercise before, you might finish it more quickly. But otherwise, take your time and it'll come in as good skill building for later on.